There's a guy who's probably the number one wide receiver in the NFL, if not top three. I mean, your top three wide receivers are what? Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, in some order.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
I don't think CeeDee Lamb's quite in that conversation.
No.
At this point.
No. We're not putting the Cowboy up there anyway.
That's fact. But we got this story out of Minnesota that, the contract discussions with Justin Jefferson are not going well. That they might even be at the point now where they're considering trading Justin Jefferson. And there's rumors flying around. There's stuff I saw yesterday about, would the New England Patriots trade the number 3 overall pick to the Minnesota Vikings for Justin Jefferson. So maybe the Vikings can take a quarterback or another wide receiver.
That seems like something that would be resolved if it does get resolved during the draft, because the Patriots want a quarterback. As you say that, though, that's how much Jefferson is worth.
Is a top 5 pick.
Yeah, you would think at the very least that's involved, if not other draft picks to help out.
I think it would cost an arm and a leg to acquire Justin Jefferson.
I agree with that.
Now,
and then you got to pay him.
You got to pay him.
And I mean, it seems like he wants a lot.
Yeah, 5 years, 150 is I think what I saw. That's like what, $30 million a year. Math is hard. That's one thing you'll learn about me. I'm not great at math, so I hope you are. That you can make up for me in that deficit of mine. But I'll tell you, Paul, if Justin Jefferson is traded to another team, it would be a tragedy if it's not the Houston Texans.
Do you think it would be a tragedy if it's not the Houston Texans?
I understand the idea of not wanting to spend too much money in free agency and not wanting to go get guys that are going to cost you an arm and a leg like Mike Evans or T. Higgins if he would have been available. But Justin Jefferson is in such a different category than other guys you can typically acquire. Like it's Christian McCaffrey, what he did to the 49ers, I think times at least 2. It is a guy that comes in here immediately, and as much as I love Nico Collins, he's way better than Nico Collins.
I disagree with the McCaffrey comparison, because when you're talking about a running back, this is a guy who you're handing the football off to and you're throwing the football to. So as far as a per touch basis, Jefferson's not that. I mean, Jefferson, best case scenario, 15 receptions in a game or something like that. But for the most part, receivers like Justin Jefferson, no matter how good they get, it's 8 touches a game. That said, he is such a difference maker. But a tragedy if another team's trade for Justin Jefferson, Joe. I mean, you got 2 good ones.
I know you have 2 good ones, but I don't know if you have a great one. Because that to me is where Justin Jefferson, the guy you mentioned you mentioned Randy Moss. I think C.J. Stroud and Justin Jefferson could push that record. I'm not even trying to be super hot takey, but like
it sounds a little hot.
I know it is.
You sure sound a little hot takey.
But C.J. Stroud, we know what he can do, and we know what Justin Jefferson's to do. Like my imagination just runs wild of what those two would do together on a field. Now I know you don't have a top 5 pick, so maybe acquiring someone like this is more challenging. But I would be very comfortable. Most of the time, a top wide receiver goes for at least 2 firsts. I would be willing to go 2 firsts and a good player to get this done.
But what are you costing yourself if you give up a couple of first-round picks?
I always view it as
defensive lineman, offensive lineman, among cornerback, by the way, which you could definitely use a second good one. There's a lot of players that you can draft there, and I am generally on the same page as, hey, there are certain players you can get, and we overvalue the draft picks. And if Jefferson is available to what you're saying, okay, I'll think about it. But then I look at my roster, I realize I have 2 good wide receivers in Nico Collins and Tank Dell, 2 who I think can continue to improve. They are both young players. And I think to myself, I got to allocate my resources to other areas of the football team. I can't be a fantasy effing football team, because that's what you've got, that fantasy football mindset right now.
I would rather be, do what the Miami Dolphins did. Like I think that, they had Jalen Waddle already. Now they only had 1 wide receiver, and they had Tua. Now at the time, Tua hadn't really taken off yet. But we've seen what's happened to the Miami Dolphins offense. Now it hasn't led to Super Bowls and things like that, but that's mostly because of their quarterback. But I like the idea of having that generational talent. If you can acquire one, I feel like you should. Most of the time, I would not be in favor. The CeeDee Lamb part of this. If CeeDee Lamb wanted to have a trade and wanted to be traded, I would not do this deal for CeeDee Lamb. I would only trade that much draft capital for Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase.
I think I'd only do it for Tyreek Hill, but I also don't know how much longer Tyreek Hill
I think he's going to play like one more year.
Right. Because he does say that he wants to retire soon and get into porn.
Yep.
So best of luck.
Good luck.
If that's the route he chooses. I say that about Tyreek because I still think he is the fastest player that I have ever seen.
100%.
Again, I'm 34, so I'm sure there's some other guys from back in the day that you guys might bring up listening right now. Okay, so I'll walk down this road with you.
Okay.
I do not co-sign this, but if you're going to trade for Justin Jefferson, you got to trade Nico Collins.
I do think that's part of this. And that, when you look at the Minnesota Vikings history, like the way they did the Diggs trade was they traded Diggs and they acquired Jefferson. Now, they didn't know they were getting him. They celebrated when the Eagles took Jalen Reagor or whoever it was from TCU because that was like one of the worst draft picks ever. But I do think that the Minnesota Vikings would want a wide receiver. My problem with where we're going down this road is I think you said the wrong wide receiver. And I think that if I was the Minnesota Vikings, I would want to put together a deal to have Jordan Addison and Tank Dell on the field at the same time.
Okay.
So that's where it actually would become more complicated in this conversation for me, is that you'd have to then pay Nico and have Jefferson and lose Tank Dell. That to me would be a hard sell. I would trade Nico though.
Okay. I don't think you trade Dell.
You can't.
I don't think
they're
you
in
can.
Turks and Caicos right now, him and CJ.
Right. I don't think CJ would like that. Obviously, football's a business. He's going to learn that over the course of his career because the Texans will lose guys that he wants to keep, and he will be pissed about that. And we'll see if he acts like we've seen some players act like when they lose their favorite target. But if I'm the Texans, I am not moving Tank Dell. I think that Dell does a lot of things that make him such a difference maker. Please, for the love of God, keep him away from the goal line.
Please.
Nico Collins is somebody that I'd either want to be in that package with the Vikings. I would like to think he would be more amenable to a big-time deal, given that he's not on a first-round contract, than a Justin Jefferson, and maybe that drives the asking price down. But the other part about this too, Joe, is I want to have multiple wide receivers that do different things. And I think that Jefferson is more similar to Nico Collins.
Sure.
Tank Dell is just so unique as far as just being a small but guy who's able to do things with the ball in his hands as a runner because of his quickness, but also a guy who is able to get open at all levels of the field. And in addition to that, seems to have a sort of Vulcan mind meld, sorry to go Trekkie on you, with Stroud after a year. And it's something that we had heard about before the draft. A story that I thought got a little bit too much of the...
that CJ told him to draft Tank?
Let's just say it got a little too much. That story got a little too much ass kissing.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
I feel like people were slurping on that one a little too much. Let's relax a little bit on that one, okay? Like the Texans didn't draft Dell because Stroud told them to, but at the same time, they have a rapport. You want to keep that thing going, and if you are putting a gun to my head, maybe CJ Stroud just gets he stands on that business someday, like he did with that guy in the Broncos. He comes into the office with Nick Caserio and he's like, I need Justin Jefferson. Then fine, I'll try to make Nico Collins a part of that deal.
So the 23rd pick, your first in 2025, Nico Collins. If that were the asking price by the Minnesota Vikings for Justin Jefferson.
You're thinking your first round pick's going to be pretty damn late in the draft.
I mean, you trade for Justin Jefferson, you're probably thinking like that's the 28th pick in the draft.
I feel like they might be asking for 2 to 3 first round picks. If that's the case, then you hope that Nico Collins drives that down a little bit. But they also know, hey, you got Stroud. Okay, this is going to be a team picking in the 20s for the most part over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I do think that's because the Texans are this good already. It does change the math on a trade. Like we've seen teams make these trades before, and sometimes when you're trading for that second first round pick, you're hoping to get what the Bears got. You know, like the first pick in the draft, the top 5 pick, you're hoping that you're trading to a team that's going to stink next year.
Right.
And if you make that trade with the Texans, that's not going to happen. Like now the Vikings probably also know that where if you trade Justin Jefferson, he's probably going to be like that team's probably going to be pretty good. Mm-hmm. But I would entertain that. How much past that I would go, I'm not sure. Maybe a second I would throw in there, but I'm not going to, as much as I love Justin Jefferson, I do think 2 firsts and Nico is a very fair price, honestly. And it would deplete the Texans probably too much to go much past that.
Yeah, the thing is, you still have holes to fill. I don't think you're as close to a Super Bowl as you want to be. Having Stroud is a huge difference, but there's a lot of things that this team needs to improve on, and Stroud is not going to bring the entire talent level of a roster that has a ton of free agents up to the point where you feel like you can beat Kansas City. You feel like Baltimore's not going to stuff you in a locker and like slide poop through the little holes in the locker. I don't know if anyone's done that. Probably O'Doyle's did.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done that before.
Sounds like you've done it.
O'Doyle rules.
Such a specific thing.
Yeah.
That no one's ever heard
to
of.
you?
No, it didn't happen to me.
Okay.
No. You didn't hear about his high school football exploits. He was the one pushing the poo into the locker.
There's some other people doing some weird stuff.
You were the hazer?
That Northwestern ogre stuff. I'm just glad that they left me alone.
Was it more like press prep? Didn't have an investigation?
No, they did not, Sean. Broomsticks were involved.
I would say, was it like Blue Mountain State?
No one was embarrassed by it. No, I mean, it was just guys being guys, every now and then, guys are guys.
Are you a Blue Mountain State guy, Paul?
Yeah, I love Blue Mountain State.
Are you excited for the relaunch? That they're going to bring it back?
I'm very curious as to how they're going to do the relaunch, given that the lead character, who the main character,
he's
Thad Castle. Well, Thad Castle's become a serious actor all of a sudden. Is he going to go back to being Thad Castle? I'm curious. I very much enjoyed these 2 seasons of Jack Reacher that he's been in.
It's very good.
Of course, Sean Mapes and I, who we saw the last Fast and Furious. I mean,
I am so happy.
He was a very good part of that movie. I enjoyed his entry into the Fast and Furious franchise.
When I found out I was doing this show with you guys, I'm not gonna lie, the first thing that popped in my head was we get to go see all the new Fast and the Furious together.
Family.
That's a little bit disrespectful that the first thing you thought of was the movies. But
I was jealous. I was jealous that you guys
fine.
went last time, and I was like, I know I'm still kind of new here and didn't cut the invite. Yeah, but now, like when the new one comes out, like,
and I think we watched it after a Thursday show at like 2:00. It was
right away,
immediate.
Yeah.
So like the earliest ticket we could get.
I'm looking forward to that, like, because I also love those movies.
They're so good and they're so bad, but the good is what makes it bad, and the bad is what makes it good. If that makes any sense.
Is there any other wide receivers or anything that you would entertain for a lesser value?
Look, I think the Texans are good at receiver. I do.
Yeah.
I feel like they got enough contributions from some of the other wide receivers in the 3 and the 4 spot. The thing that you just really are hoping for is that you don't run into a situation where Collins is banged up, he only played 15 games, or Tank Dell's banged up. And of course, injuries happen, but you can't have the stable of Lamborghinis in your garage that we all want,
Yeah.
Like, just because you played fantasy football doesn't mean you can have like 3 quasi number 1 wide receivers.
I have 2 names for the other side. I want to throw out your way. 2 guys that might get traded this offseason.